No, that's my goal, is to hopefully try to be like, no, I feel like I have a foot in both, but I'm authentically myself in those places,
Yeah.
If that's not you, you know what I mean? Like I don't need Scott Hahn trying to recite NWA, because that's not who he is, Which is not
That'd be interesting.
That would be cool. It'd be cool, you know what I mean? But the idea is that like there's different places, right? There's like Dr. Alex Gote, who you could tell he's really been about that life, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he's also authentically here, or like you, or some of these other people.
Welcome back to another episode of PPK. Feeling pretty good. Feeling
Feeling a little bit more consistent than generally.
Yeah. We can actually say that we've got some in the bag. In the bag. Keone is repping out there in Cali. Just got back from Cali visiting them. So good time with Keone, Michelle, and baby Gianna. How's it going, Keone?
Good vibes. Ready for another episode. But yeah, I'm just trying to hold it down out here in crazy Cali.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few good men left in California. Keone is definitely one of them, for sure. So hopefully you guys are enjoying the 2022 consistency as it relates to PPK, and got a lot of different exciting things coming up. So stay connected with us, and we appreciate all those that continue to be loyal listeners to us. And as usual, we have an inspiration for our episode, and I'm going to kick it over to Meeks.
Yeah, so my dad and I were actually attending a Phoenix Men's Conference. I think we actually mentioned this in the last one. And one of the speakers was the University of Mary president, who's Monsignor Shea, I believe they say it, Monsignor Shea. And he actually wrote, would basically be like an essay, right? I think it's called From Christendom to Apostolic, or something like that, from a Christendom age to Apostolic age, or something like that. And his talk was surrounding this idea. And so it was super enlightening talk, and something that we talked about a lot. I think things like in sort of Kanye West and the revival, and some of these ideas of, or now we're in the final battle. We had another episode about that, and Fatima and stuff like that. And so so this idea of basically we are no longer in Christendom, and we need to move into an apostolic mode. And kind of what that means is a Christendom society is obviously one that goes forward under these kind of set of assumptions and kind of things that we are looking at in a narrative provided by Christianity. So that's basically America's founding, that not necessarily Christendom, that we have a Catholic monarchy and sort of those things, but the idea that we have been largely influenced under a narrative by Christianity, which we could say, especially in America. And when you operate under that way, the way you evangelize is a little bit different. So the way that Monsignor Shea, actually I think C.S. Lewis said this, the difference is that before, when we were talking to people who were already Christians, kind of like, or I guess even before then, the first Christians were like talking to people, and it's like having a young teenager fall in love for the first time, right? They never experienced it before. Maybe they had some of these pagan practices and stuff like that. And, you would adjust that depending on the Greeks versus the Jews versus, some of the other Romans or something like that. Everything would kind of switch depending on the culture and everything, and how they believed. It'd be much different. And so now what we're looking at, I think this is C.S. Lewis's metaphor, is actually our divorced wife that knows everything about us and wants nothing to do with us. And that's who we're now evangelizing to. So it's all these people who grew up Catholic or Christian. They're baptized. They know what we're about. They always claim, I love that one. And they just, they don't think it's church is for them, or religion is for them, or whatever it may be. And so basically it's this idea of, we're discussing how we need to step it up, how there's things that we need to go about, how we need to start changing our ways to not, and it's not adjusting the times in the sense of, spirit of Vatican II necessarily, of some people taking that to a different light that it shouldn't have been, and let's change everything about the Mass and those things. But it's about the idea that you can't go to the Greeks and expect to evangelize them the same way you did to the Jews. There's a philosophy base there, and there's people who actually understand the Old Testament, and they understand the story of Moses and that kind of stuff, right? So you can't do the same. So now that we're in different times, we can't keep acting like we're talking to the same people in the times of Christendom. We can't even act like we're talking to the same people of the 90s or the 80s. We're in a completely different time, and therefore we need to start stepping up in different ways. And then I'll give it over to you guys, but just as an example, one of the most awesome things about what Monsignor Shea is doing with the University of Mary is that he actually has this program with Arizona State University that he was telling us about. So him and Bishop Olmsted
Yep.
worked on this thing basically to where people can take classes on the Catholic faith essentially in different forms of that and different topics instead of basic core curriculum at Arizona State. So what's known to be one of the biggest party schools in the nation, actually you can go and learn and have real high level theology courses instead of taking gender theory, transism, and dance theory as a core. So those are the things where he's saying, hey, we can't keep doing the same things that we can. We can't just expect kids to want to go to Franciscan, University of Mary, Ave Maria. We have to start coming to these people. Because what we're understanding is, even if when they're going to the Notre Dames or LMU or this or that, it's not happening there. So we can't just keep expecting the same thing, right? And getting a different result from it. We have to step up. So I think that's what this topic is going to be about in this episode.
Yeah, I think just to kind of break it down for the listeners as well, when we think about Christendom versus apostolic times, there was a time, obviously, and you think about the Christendom error of back when Constantine actually made, the edict that the Christian faith, Catholicism, was the empirical faith, right? So therefore, everything kind of folded underneath that purview. And it reminds me, Keone, one of the things that came to mind just as an example of this is like when Coach LaManna was talking to you about, the switch from UC Davis to Franciscan. And he was like, what do you say at UC Davis, it's going to be hard to be Catholic. And at Franciscan, it's going to be hard not to be Catholic, right? And so you see the difference where you have those two forces pulling you in different directions where we can no longer expect the methods of which we evangelize, as you've been saying, Meeks, to work anymore. We can't think that somehow our Catholic or Christian faith, for that matter, is informing the justice system, the university system. It's actually quite the opposite, right? Like we see, think about the university system. It's very diabolical what's happening in those cases where they're preaching this gender ideology. They're doing things that are confusing young minds. And, you think about the socialism and the Marxism that's being, that these kids are being indoctrinated into versus being classical philosophical foundations where they can actually learn how to think, critical thinking skills, and learn how to reason towards truth and recognize natural law and natural order, things of that nature. Whereas now it's glamorizing and glorifying disorder and just this perverted view of everything, really. So it's really this idea of we're no longer there. I mean, I think we've mentioned this on numerous episodes about just the fact that we're in a post-Christian era, that majority of the United States and definitely the rest of the world does not identify with any faith at all. And when you used to be, at least for us in our history, we actually used to be very Christian, and that informed everything else. But what say you, Keone?
The term that's coming to mind is, we used to say in basketball, KYP, which is an acronym for Know Your Personnel. And when you think of like a good leader on a team, you want to know your teammates, you want to know those around you and how to operate so that your team can be successful. And so when I think about us as the church militant, all of us on earth, baptized Christians trying to go out into the world and evangelize, and recruit new teammates, for the glory of God, like you need to know the people that you're going to be preaching the word to. You need to know their hearts. And so we're not reaching out to those who are just yearning, and not to say that these people don't exist, but I think when we talk about just at large in the general mainstream society, majority of them aren't outwardly seeking like this love, this just and all merciful God. Most of the time, they're responding almost in rebellion from a wound. And so maybe what they know from a God is judgment. Maybe what they know from God is their parents and their rigidity and do as I say, not as I do. And who knows what they know? Maybe there was some abuse. Like there's so much to it. But like you mentioned, that the idea of the divorced wife, it's a wound that divorced wife is operating from. I know you, and I know what you did to me, or the turmoil that our relationship caused one another. And I know your tactics. I know what you're going to try to do. Stay away from me. And I think that's, if we're honest right now, it can't be a post-Christian era if we were actually in the Christendom era of like seeking or operating from these core values. We've come so far away from these values that we're actually starting to be appalled by it. Like when we introduce it, it's almost distasteful to the society at large. It's past. It was that constricting, judgmental ideology. Now we're so much more beyond that. Now we're spiritual. Now it's whatever you want to be, right? Now it's you can be your own God, or you in the universe, right? It's like we've abandoned like these core principles. So when we're thinking about our personnel, right, knowing our personnel, who are we talking to? They don't have the same heart that maybe the Christendom era had. These hearts that were just thinkers, right? They may have been worshiping a tree, but they are just thinking about the possibility, and they're sitting inside. They had underlying virtues, and I think now it's any almost reflection of God is not that. I mean, He's everywhere, but any ounce of like outward God brought to them, it's almost just distasteful. Like there's this rage, kind of like that divorced wife. Like, that's my husband. That's my ex-husband. Get out of here with that nonsense, you know? And so we need to really wake up. And like you said, Pops, we need to change the way we're approaching those that we want to evangelize, because as you see, and we'll talk a little bit more into this, how it just hasn't been successful, or we just haven't done anything at all.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to, I think what C.S. Lewis was comparing is the courtship, right? The courtship versus the divorced wife or divorced spouse. So you look at people who are looking for love and starving, and we know ultimately that's where even the brokenness is for folks, that they were. So it's either looking for love or running from the hurt. And I think that's where you see a lot of that. But how else we unpack this, Meeks?
Yeah, one of the interesting things that Monsignor Shea says is actually that he doesn't think what we have in front of us is a moral challenge, but rather an intellectual challenge. And so this idea that for the first time ever, it's not even a case of people who kind of in the back in the day, right, where they understood maybe abortion or some of these other things were possibly moral issues and maybe could be ashamed about it. We've actually gotten to the point where we've intellectually told ourselves and debated and philosophized that these are actually good things. So that's actually my right. We got to the point where we've gotten so far from the idea that, okay, I see how this could be a bad thing, to the fact that no, this is actually good, and you opposing it is the bad thing. So we're at a challenge that we've never faced before, which requires, once again, this whole idea of apostolic mode is it requires new ways of trying to go about it. It requires new ways of evangelization. And so just I'll have another little excerpt here of a definition of what this kind of apostolic mode and time is. And Monsignor Shea says it's when the church understands herself to be vastly different from the world around her, needing to make her way against hostility or apathy, unable to count on the wider society to sustain her institutions or carry her vision of life. I think this is a pretty key one, because I don't think a lot of the church understands that they're actually vastly different from the world. And I think we like to think it, and maybe we could revert to scripture when we talked about Instagram faith and some of this other stuff. I think the issue is when people don't understand they're vastly different. The issue is that when they keep trying to put the pride flags on churches, you're not understanding you're different from the rest of the world. You're trying to do something. You're trying to operate in a time that you're not actually in. You're not agreeing with these folks. And I think that's something we need to actually focus on. And the issue when we see, all these big Catholic influencers posting black squares and stuff, you're not understanding you're different from the world. You're not understanding that's what apostolic time is people that do understand it. And so I think it took, like we were saying, it took a lot of the COVID stuff. I think it took maybe some questionable stuff by Pope Francis and things like that. So a lot of us started to be like, hey, what's actually going on here? Maybe we're not where we are, where we thought we were exactly, and I think that's the idea what the apostolic age is. And even more so, not even the fact that I think we've operated like we're in Christendom, in the sense that like we've kept assuming that we have this Christian narrative. It's more the fact that we just took a back seat and go, oh no, we had our time. Now since the Enlightenment, we get it, guys. You need to have your platform now too, so you guys can go ahead and we'll just stay back. You're right. You know what? Gay marriage, we shouldn't be talking about that anymore. You guys already beat that one. Somehow we're still having the pro-life talk, which I think is amazing that it's even at this. I mean, after what are we on? 50 years now, almost. Next year will be 50 years since the Roe v. Wade.
Thanks, yeah.
So that's pretty crazy that it's having that. But I think it's just this whole idea, something that I won't dive too much into. But I think this idea we just got bullied and took a seat back is just things. I think scientifically that's been the case in the sense of, I've always said this about evolution and stuff like that. If you don't believe that, you're just some stupid Neanderthal and this and that. And it's just a lot of things to where it's like, hey, here's two signs of evidence. In the middle, though, here's this theory I put together, but it's science. Here's your theory, but it's faith, therefore it's stupid. But you're both putting faith into two different things.
Yeah.
And just because yours is represented by Bill Nye, who's not a real scientist, and mine's represented by the church, that doesn't make me any less stupid or something like that. And I'm trying to, make their arguments sound dumb. There's some good evidence and stuff like that on their side as well. But this idea that we don't have to keep getting bullied by that stuff. So it's not this idea that not only do we keep operating like we're in an age of Christendom, we operate in the sense of, no, we need to be in the back seat and let everyone else, you guys go ahead. It's good for you to have your voice too. Not that these people can't have their voice, but truth is truth. So there's got to be a certain point when we understand, no, these things, you guys had your chance. How many colleges do we have to see get ruined, right?
Yeah.
How many churches do we have to see be even more disgusting than they are right now in terms of I think one of the biggest things, I don't know if I mentioned this, but one of the biggest things that made me more of a traditional Catholic, which just means more Catholic, is that when we went to Europe and I saw, wow, this is what churches were.
Mm.
This is what they are in those countries. And I came back here realizing what the hell happened to what we were doing. And it's because we thought we were in a different age than we were. We didn't understand we were different from the rest of the world. We wanted to make it look like grandma's house or whatever. I don't know what architects we hired back then, but that's what we were going for something there.
Apparently we were hurting for money.
Something's going on to where it's like, we're not understanding that part. I think it's a small thing, but it's something to understand. No, we're not actually that way. But then being able to take the good things, right? It's not just looking like the world. It's being able to understand the tradition of our faith and understand where are they doing well. Why is it that the Warner Bros made a movie Unfathoma back in the day, but now all we get is, Indian Jesus that has a wig on, and for our best movie about Jesus, and he's like hippie guy. It's like, where's that split at? So there's got to be a certain level of balance where we're pushing ourselves. Why aren't we back at the heights of art? You know what I mean? Back when the church was really paying for the artists of all generations to be making the art in our churches. Mm-hmm. Or we're the reason for hospitals and colleges. We are those reasons. And now we're also the reasons why they're all failing, because we decided that we wanted to be like the rest of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, but you think about, the fact that if that education is available to everybody, you're welcome, right? Catholic Church. The fact that hospital systems exist, you're welcome, Catholic Church. I mean, there's so many different things that we can point out. And I think, bringing up Europe, I think you brought up a good point where you guys remember, right? Whether it didn't matter which country we were in, but like when you're walking in Italy, it's like it's like you can just pop in, you walk into this little small church, and it easily is 20 times more beautiful than what we see today on average. And yet you're going, wait a minute, there's one like every other block. And so they didn't have to spend a boatload of money, but they did, obviously they didn't have to do that. But it's like the church came together, the community came together because they realized that was the center of a village, right? Was that the faith was of the utmost important. If you think about it from Christian perspective, it's the faith that actually bridges all gaps. All classes, all races, the universality of the church, which we saw when we went to, whether it be World Youth Day or in Europe, where you just see we are all united in faith in Christ, specifically through the highest form of prayer for us in the Mass. But it does go to show that, we've been talking about this too, where we've got to do a better job in our architecture, in our arts, in our movies, and how we depict, right? We always know a Christian movie, outside of Mel Gibson's direction, we really struggle. Like, are we paying these guys, or are we paying them in peanuts? What's going on here, right? Can we get people so that actually can act? And I'm being obviously a little bit facetious there, but the point is we can do better, and we can do better. And I think because we watered down the gospel, we watered down the faith, because we try to look like everything to everybody. Look at what we have, right? Is now we have people no longer identifying. No longer, Keone, to your point, there's a disdain for God, right? People are actually indignant towards God and the faith, specifically the Catholic Church, because we're the longest standing, church, because it was founded by Jesus Christ. But great points, Keone. What else you got to say on this one?
just the kind of the overarching theme that both of you brought up that stood out to me is the idea of being set apart. And I'm doing the Bible in a Year with Father Mike. May or may not be like 5 days behind, but we don't need to talk about that too long. But he Father Mike has talked about this in various chapters as we're kind of going in this journey of Israel making their way to the land that was set out for them. And he stresses the idea that God constantly lets Israel know that, like, I know your heart, but you have been chosen and set apart.
Mm.
And so when you're chosen and set apart, you have to live differently. And it's like this idea that you're going to go with, and past the Canaanites and the Moabites and the whatever, and they're going to live differently. And I know your hearts. You're going to want to be like them. You're going to want to do what they're doing. But I'm your God and you're my people. And you have to resist it. You have to live differently. You have to be set apart because you're not them. Like, this is the land that I have set out for you. And if you follow me, like, everything will be okay. But we've come into this idea. I think we've lost that idea that, like, being Christian doesn't mean we blend in. Like, we should be the minority. Like, we should stand out in a sense because we're living very differently. And I think we've really lost that sense of pride in living differently. Like, that's a good thing. You don't want to live like the world. And so I think, you think of, in the season of Lent, how the devil, we read it like the first week of Lent, first Sunday of Lent, the devil tempting Jesus in the desert. And he says, like, look at this world around you. I'll give this to you if you bow down before me. Like, the world is in his hands, the devil's hands. And so the more we try to conform to what this world is saying, the pop culture is saying, the more we lose our identity as being chosen by God, as being set apart. And then when people look at us and we try to reflect this tainted, blurred, broken idea of Christianity, of our faith, people are almost hate it because we're dipping a little bit of God into this poison, and it's still poison. Instead of really, like, living giving them a completely different liquid.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I think is that first idea, that first theme is recognizing our identity as being set apart for God. And the next thing that you guys brought up was the intellectual. And I think that's a huge thing. We are just not well formed. I mean, you think about, like, when we grew up, it was like barely any of us knew our prayers. And if we did know our prayers, we definitely didn't know the Mass. And, we didn't know the depth of the Eucharist. So a lot of people, like you mentioned, we're in an age now where people know of at least the Catholic Church, or they definitely know of Christianity, and they don't like it. So a lot of people almost hate it. So what we have to do is, like you said, Meeks, is this intellectual battle. We need to be well formed so that those people, when we face our divorced ex and they're saying, well, I know your games, I know what you guys say, I know what you're about, right, Meeks? We have to be able to have the apologetic armor and weaponry to be able to say, no, I hear you, but that's not true. This is the truth. But a lot of people were not formed. And that's where, like you mentioned, this bully, we're like, oh, well, I guess that's a good point. I mean, abortion, now they take it and they run with it.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're so misinformed or uninformed. So that's I just wanted to bring out that lack of identity, the lack of formation. And then the last thing, and we've talked about it before, is effeminacy. It is, we have this issue where men in general, but I mean all of us, are just so effeminate, and we don't have courage. We're not standing up. We think of, like, this Monsignor who's going into a university system, a public state school, and saying, let's infiltrate in a way and give these Catholics real education. Like, there's that courage that needs to be taken. And we're in a different age. We're not in the Christendom age where people are yearning. Like, we're facing a bunch of divorced exes who do not like us. Like, we need to be bold and go out with poise, but with fervor, armored with our intellect, and trusting that and knowing our identity as being set apart for God. And I think we just lost so many of those aspects.
Yeah, being bold and creative. I think that's the other key part too, right? Is that we've got to be, as our Lord said, wise as serpents, but gentle as doves. And so we have to find creative ways to be able to infiltrate, of course, the bad guy system, but really just witness to it, because I think that's the other part. And I think about you too, and I'd be curious to kind of know, because your generation is suffering the consequences of my generation and the generations that came before you, that failed in catechesis, failed in forming us, failed in protecting the faith and the deposit of faith, failed in you know transmitting the faith to others, and really this is the result of it, right? They've allowed the devil to seep in to destroy marriages, to destroy families, to destroy faith, and then now we're trying to rebuild. Here we are trying to rebuild, but how does that work when we were just recently with a priest friend who kind of serves as a chaplain for the local university, non-Catholic, but here you have kind of a Newman Center environment, and so he had a handful of kids or students that showed up. I guess they're not kids since they're adults going to school, but here he is, kind of they're watching a video about the search for truth in life, and then he's going to lead them in the rosary, and then he realizes that when he's doing the rosary, nobody knows how to pray it. Nobody knows the Our Father. Nobody knows the Hail Mary, and he's the only one speaking. And so he came away from that going, I'm going to have to get back to the base. I have to literally teach them the Our Father. And so what did he do the next time around? Is he said, okay, let's go. We're gonna here's what a rosary is. I'm gonna give you guys all handouts, and this is how this prayer works. And I think most of us we know that, right? Like, it used to be really easy. Like, yeah, just pray the rosary. Like, what is what's the rosary? Outside of people knowing, because a lot of people use it as a necklace nowadays, right? Because it's a cool thing, or they have beads, and anyways, there's a lot of that visually, but most people are like, Our Father. What are you talking about? Hail Mary, definitely don't know what that is. And Glory Be, I don't know what you're talking about. So what do you guys say? Because I think in a very real way, see, I can, in my age group and the age group before me, there was at least seeds planted. There's at least people who are familiar with Catholicism that I can touch that place of where they have the experience as a young kid being an altar server, right? Or the experience of a young woman being part of a novena for a funeral, right? Or whatever it may be, or rosary. But like you guys, what are you running into? And what do we say to our listeners out there that say, okay, I want to be part of the apostolic age. What do I got to go do to be set apart as a sent disciple to evangelize the world?
You have to start pushing yourself. That's for sure. I think there's got to be different ways of reaching. That's the whole point of Monsignor Shea's book, is what we're doing before, we have to act like things are different now. So adjust to the times that are being there. So I think it's just funny, because I think what we've done is we've taken all the worst characteristics possible from the world, and then we've refused to adopt any of the good ones they have, right? So it's oh, okay, Velvet's super in. Let's hop on that train. Or grandma's living room churches are really in. Let's make sure we get on that one. It looks like that's going to be a good stock to invest in. And then it's oh no, we're actually all still dressing like it's 2001, and it's been 21 years after 2001. So it's we just take all the worst things ever, and then we I think so. We're gonna find a movie, and you're gonna figure out that you can add a green screen for the first time or something. There's all these things where it's what do we we take all the worst things ever, and then we just completely refuse to do the good stuff. And I think that's how you start evangelizing these people. It's because I grew up with a ton of people, because when you go up in California, it's a whole lot of Mexicans and Filipinos, which means they're all getting confirmed. And they're not going to mass in between that, but they're getting confirmed, so they have some sense of identity. But it's the fact that it's the reason why we're doing the things that we're doing. There's a sense of relatability that we lost. It's where are we approaching them more than pizza and taco night? There's got to be something more that we're trying to do, to where it's the way that we evangelize these people is thinking outside the box. I don't have all the answers. There's things I want to do through clothing, through this, and some other stuff that we have in the works that we're hoping we're doing that. But the idea is to hopefully encourage more people to start. How can we show a movie that shows truth in the way that they haven't seen before? How do we do those things? How do you reveal the true, the good, and the beautiful in a way that people haven't done it? That's our job to decide and to answer for. Those are our responsibilities to take in. Where can we? Why are we missing so much with the youth? Why are we missing with this group or that group? Where are we not? JP2 is really big on us evangelizing all corners, and I think a lot of the people who are people like Robert Bellarmine and some of these people who are very much tied into the end of the world type stuff, they say the world won't end till we evangelize to every corner of the world, right? So, and I think there's like even corners in our own cities. I'm talking about like the most remote part of Africa. I think it's like the next block over. They have no clue who Jesus is.
Yeah.
And it's because like all we do is try to just be like a half weird version of the world where we don't actually truly understand ourselves in it, and so it's like everyone can see through it. So it's about understanding both your places. But I don't know, that's my goal, is to hopefully try to be like, no, I feel like I have a foot in both, but I'm authentically myself in those places.
Yeah.
If that's not you, you know what I mean? Like I don't need Scott Hahn trying to recite NWA, because that's not who he is, Which is not
that'd
a
be
good thing.
interesting.
That'd be cool. It'd be cool. You know what I mean? But the idea is that like there's different places, right? There's like Dr. Alex Gote, who you could tell he's really been about that life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he's also authentic here, or like you, or some of these other people, or obviously like Bob Lesnevsky. You can tell someone's like, you know what I mean? Like, he knows what he's doing in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
And you'd be lucky to have him, you know what I mean? In some parts of the neighborhood. But then there's other people where it's like, you know what I mean? I'm not sure if you're taking Matt Fradd at the same parts of the neighborhood or something like that. But it's the idea of like understanding where you're called for, and then push yourself further. There's got to be something more there. I think that's what we're doing, is there's like, that's what we're trying to do, right? Like, how are people going to come across you besides watching a podcast? Where are you going to make a difference in someone's actual life, instead of just hoping that they come stumble upon you at some Eucharistic conference? You know what I mean? Like, it's just not going to happen most of the time. So how are we going to put that in front of people? And I think it's things like not being afraid to get into entertainment and make something good. Try to do as much as we can. Go out and ask people to donate if you need the money. I mean, that's one of the church's issues, is that we don't put money towards anything anymore. We used to put money towards projects. We used to get Michelangelo and Da Vinci and all these people. No, you need to make art, the truest art, which is revealing truth. That's what art's supposed to be. I think that's the point we got to get at. And it's going to take some people taking some risk and things like that. I know there's one person who makes like political cartoons, who's Catholic. I forget his name. I think it's like an Irish name. He was on Matt Fradd's show. He was on Michaela Peterson and Jordan Peterson's podcast together. He's really blowing up as like a political cartoonist kind of guy. But it's just stuff like that, and he just ends up being Catholic. And those are beautiful things. It's like, where are we going to start getting into the world, instead of just being these little cogs in the machine and being okay with that, to the point where it's like, no, it's time for us. Like, why don't we start production companies? Why don't we start doing, certain clothing to an actual high level and all that kind of stuff? But yeah, I'll quit rambling like that.
Keone.
Well, it starts with the confidence in your identity. And we talked about this a little bit with the parts and the mental health episode, about being secure in your identity. And that's really where our belief, our mode of operating is built upon, is that identity. And so like if we, once you and I, Minx, we've adopted this idea that we are set apart, and there's a beauty in that, we're confident in that. Not that we can always continue to grow and surrender in that identity, but we had a base level confidence in it. Well, when we go out, we are resonating that confidence, or that set apart. Everyone who's talked to us, they would, and who we've had some sort of, conversion or help in conversion, or we've had, deeper discussions, they always tell us like there's something different. And it was because we didn't try to be Scott Hahn, or we didn't try to be whoever. We were us, but we were striving, and we resonated the light of knowing that we're set apart, and there's a beauty and there's a confidence that lies in that. And we're also, the next step, the next step is feeding our intellect. Like, we want to know, because if we're going to go talk to someone who does not like the Catholic Church, who has wounds from the Catholic Church or Christianity in general, who's just not about that, right? We need to have something to talk to them about. We need to have some sort of rebuttal. But I think even before that, the thing that's helped me the most, and my friends that I've helped convert, or those that I've brought back to the church or to the church, has just been my relationship. It is just being willing to hear them out. And I just think of Jesus on the cross, and there's like the two thieves, and there's one thief that's just going off on him, and he's willing to take it. And I'm wondering how much when we go out there, are we actually out there willing to take that harsh criticism or those wounds and not be defensive, not be like, oh, like, whatever with that person, like they're doomed? Or are we able to take it as like, that's a wound, and resonate the light that we have within us with confidence? I don't know if that makes sense, but I think the idea of like, there are a lot of people who have different wounds or struggles or frustrations with Christianity or the beliefs or God in general. And if we are willing to just sit with them in that, because if I'm thinking about those who either haven't been um, evangelized to God, or like when we talked about this apostolic age, that divorced wife, right? They have some sort of mal nature, or frustration underlying. They're not like this. They're just kind of doing yoga on the side of the road, waiting for us to show them God. Like it's a different era, and I think there's a part of it is us being able to sit with them in their anger or their wounds or their misconception, like, oh, that Mary or that saint, like, you guys are we able to sit with that and be like, okay, it's a misinformed, you have no idea what the Catholic Church actually teaches, but like being able to build a relationship and sit with them while also having the apologetic knowledge to be able to meet them when the time's right. I'm just thinking of, as a client who works with people, or a therapist who works with clients with trauma or with people who are angry towards something. Like, you don't just start like, I don't just start evangelizing right there. Like, they're not ready to even hear it. Right. And I think that's where we're at right now, is we're like, come on, like, let's sing along, right? In mass, like, let's sing along. It's the guitar. We brought it. You guys like the guitar, right? And the drums, and this is all fun and games, right? People don't want it. They're not ready to, they're not ready to like appreciate it, for the mass for what it is. And so we don't want to bend over to them. We want to bring them to the fullness of the truth when they're ready. But I think it starts with the identity that we're still set apart. And we have to embrace the idea that we're set apart, but we can meet them right where they're at. And it's just, and it comes down to, just like you said, I think this is really the theme of today, is just being creative, using whatever niche that God has created us for, the talent, the gifts that we each have, and being bold and allowing God to work through that, whether that be the podcast or a conference, or speaking, or just with your coworkers, like resonating that identity of being set apart and being confident in that. People nowadays are yearning for someone who's just so secure in themselves.
Yeah.
And it's transcend. I don't know. I can't say the word transcendental. Transcendent.
Yeah.
And it's not like, I'm so confident because I just made 80 racks last month. Like, no one wants that. Like, people want an idea because they know their identity before something outside of themselves, something that's eternal. And like, when people have that in a confident way, they don't throw Jesus in your face with a sticker. When they have that confidence, people like see it and they automatically yearn for it. And I think we've missed that first step, and we keep trying to go into their world and like try to give people this washed down version of the church, and it's just not working.
Yeah, I mean, what you're highlighting on, there's a couple of things there. I do agree that we do struggle from effeminacy, and I think we've defined it before. That it's the inability to deny pleasure in order to pursue the arduous, and we definitely see that in men today, right? That we have men who fall victim and prey to their own self-serving passions, specifically in food and sex, right? So if you can't deny that, what makes you think you're going to be a chivalrous, virtuous, holy man? You can't. But the other thing that I think I'm hearing from both of you guys is essentially just authentic witness. Just be authentic. Right? People know fake when they see it. And they may entertain you, they may nod their head, they may smile and wave, but when you walk away, they're like, that fool was an idiot, right? Or whatever it was. So they, just like they know somebody who's a fake hypocrite outside of the faith, imagine in the faith. So when we try to sit there and talk hip and cool when you're not hip and cool to kids or whatever, you think they're like, dude, you're old, right? It doesn't matter. You can be 20 years old to a 13-year-old. You're like 45, right? It's just like, dude, you're super old, right? And that's because they can't even put deodorant on, right? So what do they know about anything, right? So anyways, but like when you try to be like, I'm hip and cool, man, it just doesn't work. So it's like, just be an authentic witness. I think people can respect and appreciate that, because Keone, you hit it right on the head when you say you're secure in yourself, which means you're secure in your identity as a beloved son or daughter of God, point blank. And so when you are, it's like, I'm not really moved by what you think of me. I worry about what God. Now, again, in our humanness, we do care, right? I mean, we'd be remiss to say that we don't care about what other people think about us to a certain degree, because we're human. We want to be liked. We want to be loved. We're made for community. However, it's an authentic witness to what it is do you actually live what you believe? Do you actually live and believe that with all your whole heart? And they should be able to see that. They should see in the way that you walk, talk. We've talked about this. But I think the other thing outside of being creative and or finding your niche, like you said, Keone, it's actually being the idea of being bold. Like, gosh, we have so many weak, soft people out there who are so quick to bend and acquiesce because of the bully, because of the culture saying, no, I know what's better. And then we just go, oh, okay, you're right. And then we don't do anything with it. Like, who wants that kind of faith? Sign me up for that faith. Not. But I want the faith
in the name of charity. And
right.
I'll let you, especially in the church, like, we need to be charitable. And I think that's a lie. Right. That's false charity, because charity is loving them for their own good.
Right.
In the
and
eyes
doing
of God.
Something about it. And doing something about it.
So if we're leading them astray in the name of charity, well, that's just false. That's like tolerance now. That's a false tolerance. We allow them to continue down their path of destruction, instead of being bold enough to witness in a courageous way and speak truth in a way that might be calculated. You might need to, filter how you say it, but truth is truth. Yeah. And I'll let you go on, Pops, but I think that's something that we in the church, hierarchy or laity, that we have an issue with, is this, oh, well, we don't want to hurt feelings, or, we got to be charitable and let them go. And look, no, we need to be creative and pull people into the church, because we have to be set apart. Like this, it's the chosen few, and
well,
is it
working? Well, the question is it working? Why are we talking about Christendom to Apostolic? If it was working, this idea of, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. We wouldn't be in this predicament where people don't know God and despise God, right? Like, so much so that you want to root God out of everything. But the thing that we're talking about, that false charity, or if there's false humility, is the lie, the devil, and he's gotten into so much into the church and people, is what? You're trying to separate truth from love, as if they're separable, just like mercy and justice. Like, you can separate them. Actually, they're intrinsically tied to one another. That if it's real love, it's actually grounded in truth. And if it's truth, then it's actually rooted in love. Why would you think you can separate that? Well, I want to love them, so therefore I'm going to keep the truth from them. Then you don't really know what love is. Or, you know what? I want to extend mercy to them, so I'm not going to be as just to them. What? It makes zero sense. Then you don't know God. You don't know how God defines that. You don't know how the church defines it. And I think you're highly confused. But that idea of just being bold and courageous and firm and zealous, I think about Keone, us doing the confirmation retreat. Had somebody reach out and ask and say, hey, what do you guys normally do for your confirmation retreats? Like, what material? I'm like, us? I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, are you looking for PowerPoint, or what do you mean, catechism paragraphs? We don't approach it that way, right, Keone? Like, we hit them with some obviously theology, but you're talking about kids that don't want to be there, man. Kids that that their parents dropped them off there. They're waiting to graduate from the church. They already left the church. They just need the official paperwork, right? And so you think you're going to do what? Read some scripture to them, play a little, I don't know, red light,
Father Abraham song.
Shut up. Yeah. There's some things that we got to work on, right? When we try to bring these kids into it. But what do we hit them with? Reality. You were talking about, why do you care? I hit them with a little skiddly bop, real story, true talk, right? Like, hey, this is my conversion story, and here's why it matters to you, and then you just drop them with some truth bombs. And I think obviously you sprinkle in the faith and why is confirmation important, the reason there. But why do we assume they care? Why do we assume that they care? And I think that's the other thing too, is we can't keep doing the same thing and expect different results. That's the definition of insanity. And we keep doing the same thing. We keep assuming that married couples coming into marriage preparation actually want to live a holy and virtuous life, instead of them just going, well, my mom's praying for this wedding and they said I have to get married in the church. That's the majority of what people are doing. Or my fiance, her parents are Catholic, so I have to get married here, but I have no intention of raising our kids Catholic. Even though you say that and you agree to that before the people of God and before God himself. So, you know what I mean? It's like, this is where we kind of get caught up in, where we can't keep doing, we're lying to ourselves. And I think this is the part where we have to push ourselves, Meeks, as you said. We have to be different, and we have to, find creative ways in a way that's attractive. Holiness is attractive. We talked about that many times. So, but last parting words, Meeks, for people.
Yeah, I would say, as much as all those things are true, and we gave a lot of things out there that, as advice or whatever, I think being authentic in those things, but it's like, I think just really challenging people to like just try a little bit harder to just I think just the Protestants are just kicking our butt in terms of we can't sort of minimize the importance of things like aesthetics or things like that. They attract people. It's beauty. Those are things that we used to have in the church, which
Yeah.
was a beautiful cathedral and things like that. We don't have those things anymore. And at that point, when it's between the 1970s Velvet Banner and the really nice renovated, new looking Protestant thing, and you guys are singing the same exact songs, then it's like, obviously we're going to go to that one. It looks a lot cooler. But I just think in terms of like, okay, if you're a woman and you understand that modesty is a big issue in your dress, then like learn how to do it in a cool way, a way that people like. I think it's kind of like the blessed is she vibe in a lot of things. Is they find ways to do it, and it looks like the world just enough to attract, but has nothing to do with it. And like that, I think that's where you start pushing people and you go to a different level. It's like I'm not asking everybody, like I think it's just kind of hard and to do that. I think a lot of it has to do with being authentic and finding that in yourself. Also just pushing. Like I think there's a way to do it without. I don't think we have to look like whatever the people that live on the farms and stuff and the technology. What are they called again?
Quakers?
No, not Quakers. The other. What are they? You guys they come to Starbucks all the time, even though I don't think they're supposed to.
Oh, they
what are they? They have
I can't-
farms. They're all over America, literally.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I can't think of them. I can't think
Okay,
of it right
well,
now.
you guys know what I'm talking about too. Whoever's listening, Colin, you know what I'm talking
they
about.
were the bonnets, right?
Yeah, they wear bonnets and everything. Yeah. Anyways, the point is to be modest. You don't have to look like those people, or like all the boys have the same exact haircut. It's super creepy. Like you don't have. That's not what we're. You know what I mean? Like I feel like people take it like, oh yeah, this is what St. Francis did, so therefore I have to have a really weird haircut. No, you can have a fade. Just be virtuous though at the same time. You know what I mean? Like there's some things you can care about what you wear. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be what you wore in 2001. We're actually past that year. I was only one actually in that year, and you're still wearing the same things from that picture we took 2001. But yeah, I think that's long last parting words. But at this point, it's like I think we just have to get to a point where we're pushing ourselves, guys. We're losing the battle so much. People are leaving us all the time. Like I had I have friends who I knew grew up Catholic, but then somehow are at the Protestant praise and worship later on. And I think a lot of it's because it feels better, but I think they just do a better job of reaching out and understanding, hey, this is who we are. And there's a lot of people who authentically live it, right?
Yeah.
People who really do love God and they read their Bible and they're about it and they look like attractive enough to be like, hey, I can relate to that, rather than just the 65-year-old on average church that just looked gross,
Yeah. Keone, any last parting words for you?
I think, to add to what Miko said, is the formation. I think is also, we need to be bold. We need to live out our identity, but the intellect is, it's the intellect and the will, and so we have to have the formation, because the intellect, the knowledge of the faith, not that I only know a fraction, but knowing enough to go out into the world and be confident in it, and just like St. Thomas said, I think I said in the last episode, I've said it before, and that you can't love that which you don't know. And people know whether you love your faith, obviously in the confidence of your identity, but how much you know it and rest in that knowledge. Not like you're just a factual, you can just spit out facts, but that you know the truth and you have a relationship with truth. And I think that's we often we want one or the other. We want to just know like facts about the church, but we miss the relationship with the truth, or we want to just obsess over the personal relationship with our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. We actually don't know the actual history of the church or the truth, or So I think that's one that we can all start to do right now, regardless of we're still kind of praying about what we need to do to be bold. Is like understanding our identity as being set apart, and then now starting to grow in our formation, so that you think about it. If we're an army trying to go out into the world, there's a lot of training and boot camp, and you have to be ready and prepare yourself to go into war, because the army that we're the army or whatever that we're trying to go against, they want us to die. They hate us, and we need to change. We need to understand that's the war that we're in right now, and so just kind of shaping that perspective, that image for us to really as a send off to our listeners.
Yeah, I think makes you go ahead, Mix.
No, I just remembered it's the Amish.
Amish.
Yeah, it's Amish. And this is not disrespecting the Amish, because if you're listening to this, you should stop listening to it, because you're not supposed to be listening to it. Yeah, but yeah, we'll keep moving on.
So, Migs, I think there was one last thing that Monsignor Shea
Yes,
he's talked about
Oh
in the
my gosh.
apostolic age.
How did I
What you got to
forget?
do?
Yeah, that was crazy. Actually, I was on a bike ride earlier, and I was passing by one of the Amish, and he said the same thing. He said, "Hey, did you hear what Monsignor Shea said?" I was like, "Wait, what part?" He was like, "The apostolic mode where everyone should like and subscribe to the World of Blaze channel and follow the Instagram." I was like, "Wait, what are you talking about? What chapter is in that?" He's like, "Oh, that's chapter 6." I'm like, "Dude, I'm only in chapter 5." And then he was like, I was like, "Wait, how do you even know what World of Blaze? You're not supposed to have technology." And then he had a Starbucks cup too. And I was like, "Wait a second, I gave you that. I made you that in 2017. How do you still have that?" Yeah, it was crazy. You guys wouldn't believe it. It was at 1:59 earlier today. Yeah, that was crazy. So that was a Monsignor Shea said, according to the Amish guy, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not. There's a Mormon right behind us, and he said, "That's not true. Monsignor Shea never said that." So I don't know. You have to take both their words, not mine either. There's a lot of things, right? I mean, Our Lady of Turlock has said it. Jake, on the last video, you guys said that his testimony is pretty big on it.
Yeah.
You just never know. There's a couple episodes coming up that we have. I've done the interviews. It's been pretty life changing for a lot of people. It was crazy. Some people actually who converted way before they listened to us still say it's a part of their conversion. It's pretty weird.
Yeah. I don't know if you knew that, Keone, but
Yeah.
like we've, I think we're onto something
We've
here.
impacted people in 2012, in 2007. There's a lot of things that we've done. Even the
Our
Amish,
podcast-
they're pretty big on us.
Our podcast has?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they even said that they actually converted, when they were like in 7th grade, but somehow our podcast has always changed them, even though we were like 8 years after they were in 7th grade.
Yeah. It's this weird thing with time that, God works outside of.
Yeah, it was,
in
it
space.
was super
That
weird.
is
Dude.
amazing.
I was only 6 when you were 7th grade, dude. You're weird.
So yeah, we have fun on here too, right? We get serious, we get passionate about things, but we also have fun because why? We're joyful Catholics. We love our faith, we love our God, and we love our listeners. So do us a solid one and spread the word. Like, follow, subscribe, tell a friend, and join us next time. And until then, get holy or die trying. Guys, peace.